The sun in Norfolk tastes like salt and metal today. A warning Sophie Renner shouldn't have ignored. The rubber grips of her wheelchair are hot, biting into her palms as she pushes through the thick humidity of the afternoon. Beside her, Bear's paws make a soft, rhythmic thud-thud against the sun-baked asphalt. The German shepherd's ears are pinned back, his nose twitching at a scent the wind just carried over from the oak grove. Sophie feels the vibration of the chair as it hits a jagged crack in the sidewalk. A jarring reminder that the world isn't built for her anymore. She adjusts her grip, her chest tight with a sudden, unexplained weight. The park is alive with the sounds of a typical Tuesday, children screaming on the playground, the distant hum of a lawnmower, and the rustle of leaves. But under the oak trees, the air feels different. It's heavier. A group of young men lounges there, their laughter jagged and loud, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like a dull saw. Sophie keeps her eyes forward, her chin tilted up, trying to project a confidence she hasn't truly felt in 5 years. She focuses on the back of Bear's head, the way his fur shifts from gold to black in the light. He is her anchor, the only thing keeping her from drifting away into the memory of the life she lost. "Check it out," a voice calls out, sharp and mocking. "We got ourselves a parade." The speaker is Kyle, a guy with a backwards cap and shoulders that look like they were built in a gym but never used for hard work. He's leaning against a tree, tossing a half-empty energy drink from hand to hand. His friends, including a tall, wiry guy named Troy, stir from their spots on the grass. They don't see a woman trying to enjoy the afternoon. They see a weakness to be exploited for a cheap laugh. The smell of stale tobacco and sweat drifts towards Sophie as she nears their circle. Sophie's heart hammers against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Her knuckles are white as they wrap around the cold steel of the wheel rims. She reaches into the side pocket of her chair, her fingers grazing the edge of a crumpled, salt-stained photograph. It's her at the 20-mile mark of a marathon, sweat-streaked and smiling, her legs looking like coiled springs. It's her secret weapon, the only thing that reminds her she was once a warrior. She squeezes it once, before letting go, her breath hitching in her throat as Bear lets out a low, vibrating huff. He knows. He always knows when the world starts to close in. Sophie looks toward the distant pond where a park security golf cart slowly crawls along the perimeter. It's too far to help, but close enough to mock her with the idea of safety. She feels the heavy weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. If you were in her shoes, would you turn back or keep your head down and hope for the best? First welcoming CTA. The silence that follows the guy's laughter is worse than the noise itself. It's a vacuum, sucking the air out of the park, leaving Sophie gasping as she realizes the path forward is blocked by 3 sets of legs that have no intention of moving. "Hey, lady," Troy says, stepping onto the path. He's close enough that Sophie can see the tiny beads of condensation on his drink can. Does that thing have a horn? Or do we just have to guess when you're coming through? His friends chuckle, a sound like dry gravel. Sophie stops the chair. She has to. Bear moves to the front, his body a solid wall of muscle and fur between Sophie and the threat. He doesn't bark. He doesn't growl yet. He just stands there, a silent sentinel waiting for the first wrong move. The heat seems to intensify, the sun beating down on the back of Sophie's neck until it stings. She can hear the rhythmic clicking of a bicycle somewhere behind her, but it sounds miles away. In front of her, the reality is much smaller and much more dangerous. Kyle steps off the grass and onto the concrete, his sneakers squeaking. He looks at Bear, then at Sophie's legs, a cruel smirk twisting his features. He's looking for a reaction, a tear, a plea for him to step aside. But Sophie finds a spark of that woman in the photograph. She stares him directly in the eye, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. "We're just passing through," Sophie says, her words clipping the air. Kyle laughs, but it doesn't reach his eyes. He takes a long, slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving hers. He looks like he's weighing her value, deciding just how much fun he can have before someone notices. He looks at Bear, then back to his friends, a plan forming in the twitch of his jaw. The park around them seems to fade into a blur of green and gold, leaving only this small, tense patch of earth. "I don't think so," Kyle says, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. He takes a step closer, his shadow falling over Sophie's lap, extinguishing the warmth of the sun. Bear's ears shift forward, and a low vibration begins in his chest, a warning that is ignored. The air is so still that Sophie can hear the individual clicks of Bear's claws on the pavement as he adjusts his stance. She realizes with a jolt of pure ice in her veins that they aren't just going to let her pass. They are waiting for her to break. What would you do if you were Sophie in this moment? Stay silent or scream for help? Have you ever felt the world turn against you when you were at your most vulnerable? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts on how Sophie should handle these bullies. "Bet she can't control that mutt," Kyle sneers, his voice a jagged edge that cuts through the humid park air. He doesn't move his foot. He lets it hang there, a heavy threat inches above Bear's golden fur. Sophie's heart is a drum in her ears, the rhythm fast and uneven. She grips the cold metal of her wheelchair wheels so hard her knuckles turn the color of chalk. The smell of the guy's cheap body spray and warm soda is a wall she can't push through. Troy stands to her left, his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his thin lips. They are circling her like wolves, testing the fence. The sun feels like a spotlight, exposing every inch of her vulnerability. Sophie looks at Kyle's sneakers. Expensive, white, and clean, except for a green grass stain on the toe. That stain is all she can focus on. It's a small, mundane detail in a moment that feels like it's stretching into eternity. She wants to scream, to call out to the families having picnics near the pond, but her throat is a desert. She's a prisoner in a chair, trapped by 3 men who think her existence is a joke. The humiliation is a physical weight, heavier than the paralyzed legs she can no longer feel. "He's a service dog," Sophie says, her voice coming out as a thin wire of sound. "He's working. Please just let us go." The word "please" tastes like ash. She hates that she has to use it. She hates that these boys have the power to make her beg for a sidewalk. Kyle chuckles, a hollow sound that carries no warmth. He looks at his friends, seeking their approval, feeding off the energy of their shared cruelty. They are young, full of a misplaced sense of strength, and they have chosen the easiest target in the park to prove it. Bear remains perfectly still, but Sophie can feel the tension radiating off him. His body is a coiled spring. He isn't just a dog. He is her legs, her lungs, and her heart. When the world looks at her and sees a tragedy, Bear looks at her and sees a leader. But right now, she doesn't feel like a leader. She feels like a victim. The group moves a few inches closer, tightening the circle. The shadow from the oak tree shifts, and suddenly they are all in the dark. The temperature seems to drop 10 degrees in an instant. Troy reaches out and taps the handle of Sophie's wheelchair. The vibration travels through the frame, a sharp electric shock to her spine. "What's the matter, lady? You look a little shaky. Maybe you need a better dog." He laughs, And the sound is joined by the third guy, a stocky kid who hasn't stopped chewing his lip. They aren't just blocking her path anymore. They are invading her personal space, claiming the air she breathes. Sophie's eyes dart to the right, looking for an opening, but there is none. Every second feels like a minute. The park sounds, the splashing of the fountain, the distant barking of a golden retriever, are muffled now, as if she's underwater. She thinks about the photo in her pocket again. She thinks about the grit it took to finish that marathon. She tries to find that version of herself, the one who didn't know how to give up. But that woman had legs that worked. That woman could run away. This woman is stuck in a seat, watching a bully decide whether or not to hurt the only friend she has left in the world. Kyle shifts his weight, his sneaker finally touching the tips of the fur on Bear's tail. It's a calculated move, a test of the dog's training. Bear's upper lip twitches, revealing a flash of white tooth. But he doesn't break his stay. He is a professional, even if the men surrounding him are not. Sophie feels a tear prick the corner of her eye, and she blinking it away furiously. She will not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She will not let them see how much they have already broken her spirit. The air is thick with a sense of impending disaster. Kyle leans down, his face inches from Sophie's. She can see the pores on his nose, the dilated pupils of his eyes. He smells like a bad decision. "You think you're better than us because you got this fancy dog?" he whispers. The question makes no sense, but logic isn't invited to this encounter. This is about dominance, pure and simple. This is about making someone else feel small so they can feel big. If you saw someone being cornered like this in a public park, would you step in or call for help from a distance? Have you ever had to face a bully when you felt completely alone? Tell me your stories in the comments below. The silence is broken by the sharp, metallic snap of Kyle's energy drink tab. A sound like a gunshot that makes Sophie jump in her seat. Bear's low growl starts deep in his chest, a vibration Sophie feels through the rubber of her tires. It's a sound of pure warning, a boundary line drawn in the dirt. The hair along his spine stands up in a rigid ridge, making him look twice his size. He isn't snapping yet, but the intent is clear. He senses the malice in the air, the jagged energy coming from the three men. Sophie's hand drops to his head, her fingers burying themselves in the thick fur behind his ears. She's trying to calm him, but she's also clinging to him for her own survival. "Whoa, easy there, Cujo," Kyle says, mocking the dog's defensive stance. He takes a half step back, but he doesn't look afraid. He looks excited. The adrenaline is hitting him now, and he likes the way it feels. He looks at Troy, who is now standing directly behind Sophie's chair, his hands hovering near the push bars. Sophie feels the hair on her neck rise. She is completely boxed in. The park feels like it has emptied out, leaving her in a vacuum of hostility where no one can see and no one can hear. The humidity is a blanket, making it hard for Sophie to catch her breath. She looks at the ground, at the patterns of light and shadow dancing on the pavement. She tries to count them, a grounding technique her therapist taught her for panic attacks. 1, 2, 3. But the numbers get lost in the sound of Kyle's heavy breathing. He's staring at Bear, his eyes narrowed. He's looking for a way to break the dog's discipline. He wants the dog to lunge. He wants a reason to escalate the violence. "He's going to bite you if you don't move," Sophie warns, her voice cracking. It's a lie. Bear is trained to only bite as a last resort. But she's desperate. She needs to create a sense of consequence. Kyle just smirks. He knows she's scared, He can smell the fear coming off her in waves. It's a scent that emboldens him. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, bright red laser pointer. He clicks it on, and a tiny red dot dances across the pavement, eventually landing right between Bear's eyes. Bear's head jerks, his eyes following the light. It's a distraction, a cruel game meant to confuse a working animal. The red dot moves to the dog's paws, then jumps to Sophie's lap. It feels like a violation, a digital finger pointing at her helplessness. "Catch it, boy. Go get it," Kyle taunts, his voice rising in pitch. The other two guys laugh, a harsh, braying sound that echoes off the trees. They think this is hilarious. They think they are just playing a prank, but for Sophie, it is psychological warfare. Sophie's anxiety is a physical pain in her chest, a tightening of the muscles that makes every breath a struggle. She looks at Bear, whose eyes are darting back and forth, trying to process the strange light while also keeping watch on the three threats. He's overwhelmed. He's a hero, but he's still just a dog. He looks up at Sophie, a split second of eye contact that breaks her heart. He's asking her what to do, and for the first time in 5 years, she has no answers for him. Troy moves his hands, actually gripping the wheelchair handles now. He gives the chair a small, sharp jolt forward, forcing Bear to hop out of the way. Sophie gasps, her hands flying to the wheels to stabilize herself. "Hey, don't touch her," she yells, but it sounds like a plea. The power dynamic is so skewed it's sickening. These men have everything: mobility, strength, numbers, and they are using it all to torment a woman who just wanted to see the sun. The unfairness of it is a bitter pill that Sophie can't swallow. The stocky kid who had been quiet finally speaks up. "Let's just go, Kyle. This is getting weird." For a moment, a sliver of hope pierces through the tension. But Kyle shakes his head, his eyes fixed on Bear. The ego is in charge now. He doesn't want to leave until he's proven that he's the alpha. He wants to see the dog cowed. He wants to see Sophie break down and sob. He wants a trophy from this encounter, even if it's just the memory of her terror. Does it anger you to see someone use a service dog's training against them? What would you say to the friend who tried to walk away? Is he just as guilty for staying? Share your thoughts below. The red dot of the laser pointer vanishes, replaced by the sudden, terrifying sight of Kyle's heavy boot drawing back, preparing for a strike that will change everything. The sound of the sneaker hitting Bear's ribs is a dull, sickening thud that Sophie feels in her own marrow. It isn't a tap or a nudge. It's a full-force kick delivered with a sneer. Bear lets out a sharp, high-pitched yelp that pierces the quiet of the park like a needle. He stumbles sideways, his legs tangling as he tries to maintain his balance. The red leash in Sophie's hand jerks violently, nearly pulling her out of her seat. For a heartbeat, the world stops spinning. The birds are silent. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. "No," Sophie screams, the word ripping from her lungs with a raw, jagged edge. It's the loudest sound she's made since the day of the crash. The fury that follows the fear is a white-hot explosion in her brain. She doesn't think about her chair. She doesn't think about the 3 men who tower over her. She only thinks about the creature who has slept at the foot of her bed every night for 5 years, the one who licked the tears off her face when she thought she couldn't go on. Bear recovers quickly, his instincts taking over. He doesn't cower. Instead, he lunges forward, a blur of fur and teeth. He stops just inches from Kyle's leg, a massive, thunderous bark erupting from his throat. It's not a play bark. It's a war cry. His teeth are bared, his gums pulled back in a terrifying snarl. Kyle jumps back, his face turning the color of ash. He didn't expect the dog to fight back. He didn't expect the useless mutt to have a soul made of iron. "Keep your mutt on a leash, lady," Kyle yells, his voice cracking with a sudden, sharp note of fear. He tries to play it off as anger, but the way his hands are shaking gives him away. He looks at Troy and the other guy, looking for backup. Troy has let go of the wheelchair handles, stepping back as well. The presence of a 100-pound predator in full defense mode has a way of resetting a bully's priorities. But the damage is already done. The line has been crossed, and there is no going back. Sophie is shaking so hard the wheelchair frames rattles. She pulls Bear back toward her, her arms wrapping around his neck. He's trembling too. A fine, vibrating shudder that tells her he's in pain. She runs her hands over his side, searching for the spot where the boot landed. She feels a hot, swelling lump forming under his fur. The cruelty of it makes her stomach churn. He was doing his job. He was being a good boy. And for that, he was punished by a man who doesn't know the meaning of the word service. The confrontation has reached a fever pitch. Kyle is trying to regain his dignity, his face twisting into a mask of redirected rage. He's embarrassed that he jumped back, embarrassed that his friends saw him flinch. He takes a step forward again, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think that dog's gonna protect you? I'll put him in the ground and you right next to him." The threat is insane, a product of a bruised ego and a small mind. But in the isolation of the oak grove, it feels very real. Sophie looks around frantically. Still no one. The park ranger's cart is gone. The families are hidden by the rise of the hill. She realizes she is the only person who can protect Bear now. She finds a strength she didn't know she had, a cold, hard resolve that settles in her chest. She stares at Kyle, her eyes burning with a light that makes him hesitate. "If you touch him again, I will make sure the police hear every word you just said. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of coward kicks a service dog." Kyle's lip curls. He looks like he's about to say something, but Troy grabs his arm. "Come on, man. Someone's coming." They all turn their heads toward the sound of rhythmic footsteps hitting the pavement. A steady, fast-paced drumming that signals a runner approaching. For a second, Sophie thinks her prayers have been answered. She waits for the runner to appear, for the witness she needs to finally end this nightmare. How would you react if you saw someone kick an animal right in front of you? Do you think Sophie's threat of the police will be enough to stop them? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. The hope in Sophie's chest flickers out as Kyle realizes the runner is still far away, and he turns back to Bear with a look of pure, unadulterated spite, his foot drawing back for a second, even harder strike. The second kick is a blur of movement that ends with a sound like a branch snapping. This time, Kyle doesn't hit Bear's ribs. He catches the dog square in the shoulder. The force sends the German shepherd skidding across the concrete, his paws scratching for purchase that isn't there. Bear hits the ground hard on his side, his head bouncing off the pavement with a sickening thud. He doesn't yelp this time. He just groans, a low, wet sound that makes Sophie's heart stop. His eyes roll back for a second, showing only the whites. "No, Bear, no." Sophie's voice is a shredded wreck. She tries to wheel herself toward him, but the front wheels of her chair hit a patch of uneven grass and she nearly tips over. She is stuck, paralyzed in more ways than one, watching her best friend lie broken on the ground. The bullies are laughing now, a high-pitched, manic sound that fills the space where Bear's strength used to be. They think they've won. They think they've proven their point by breaking a creature that only knew how to love. Bear tries to stand. It's an agonizing sight. His front left leg gives way immediately, buckling under his weight. He collapses back down, his breathing coming in short, ragged gasps. He looks at Sophie, his tail giving one weak, pathetic wag before his head drops back to the concrete. He's in shock. The trauma to his body is visible in the way his chest heaves and the way his tongue lolls out of the side of his mouth. He's not a protector anymore. He's a victim of a world that has no room for the vulnerable. Sophie's world is shrinking. The green grass, the blue sky, the trees. It all disappears into a dark tunnel where the only thing that exists is Bear's pain. She feels a cold, numb sensation spreading through her arms. She is experiencing the physical trauma of the crash all over again. The sound of twisting metal, the smell of burnt rubber, the sudden, terrifying loss of control. She is back in that moment of helplessness, watching her life change forever, and there is nothing she can do to stop it. Troy and the other guy are starting to look nervous. They see the dog isn't getting up. They see the blood beginning to seep from a small cut on Bear's ear. This is no longer a prank. It's a crime. "Kyle, let's go." "Seriously," Troy says, his voice urgent. But Kyle is staring at Sophie, a strange, blank expression on his face. He looks like he's moved beyond the world of consequences. He looks like he's waiting for her to do something, to provide the final act of this tragedy. The humiliation has turned into a cold, hard despair. Sophie reaches out, her fingers barely brushing Bear's tail. "I'm sorry, Bear. I'm so sorry," she sobs. The tears are flowing freely now, hot and salty, stinging the scratches on her face she didn't even know she had. She feels like she's failed him. He spent years making her feel safe, making her feel like a person again, and she couldn't even protect him from a group of kids in a park. The weight of that failure is a crushing burden. Kyle takes a final step toward the dog, his shadow looming over the injured animal. He looks like he's going to do it again, just to finish the job. He wants to be the one who broke the unbreakable. He raises his foot, but he stops when he hears a voice. It's not a scream or a plea. It's a command. A low, vibrating tone that carries the weight of 1,000 battlefields. It's a sound that makes the air in the grove go still, as if a god had just spoken from the clouds. "Back off, now." The voice comes from the path behind them. Sophie turns her head, her vision blurred by tears. She sees a figure silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. He's tall, broad-shouldered, and moving with a terrifying, fluid grace. He isn't running anymore. He's walking. But every step he takes seems to cover more ground than it should. He's wearing a faded military shirt and cargo pants, and his face is a mask of cold, controlled fury. Can you feel the heartbreak Sophie is experiencing right now? Have you ever felt completely powerless to protect someone you love? Share your heart in the comments below. The bullies freeze, their eyes going wide as the man steps into the light, his presence filling the grove with a sense of sudden, inevitable justice that makes Kyle's knees start to shake. Nathaniel Nate Graves doesn't look like a hero out of a comic book. He looks like a man who has seen the worst the world has to offer and survived it. His eyes are the color of a winter sea, cold, deep, and unforgiving. He stops 5 feet from the group, his body perfectly balanced, his hands relaxed but ready. The transition from the desperate terror of the last 10 minutes to this sudden, heavy silence is jarring. The bullies, who were so loud and confident seconds ago, look like small, frightened children in the presence of a giant. "I said back off," Nate repeats, his voice even lower this time. It's not a request. It's an order. He doesn't look at Sophie yet. His focus is entirely on Kyle, the man with his foot still hovering near the injured dog. Nate's presence is a physical force, a wall of authority that Kyle can't find a way around. The energy in the grove has shifted from chaotic cruelty to a disciplined, dangerous calm. The command voice Nate learned in the SEALs is doing its work, bypassing the bullies' brains and hitting them right in their survival instincts. Kyle swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He tries to find his voice, tries to find the bravado that has served him all afternoon. "This ain't your business, man. The dog attacked us." The lie is weak, crumbling the moment it leaves his lips. Nate doesn't even blink. He's seen liars before, men who tried to hide behind excuses while they did terrible things. He knows exactly what happened. He saw the kicks from 50 yards away, and his blood has been at a slow boil ever since. "I saw what you did," Nate says, his words like stones dropping into a deep well. He takes one more step forward. It's a small move. But Troy and the stocky kid immediately scramble backward, putting distance between themselves and Kyle. They are abandoning ship, leaving their leader to face the storm alone. Kyle looks around, realizing his backup has evaporated. He is alone against a man who looks like he could dismantle a tank with his bare hands. Sophie watches from her chair, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The relief is so intense it's almost painful. She doesn't know who this man is, but she knows she's safe. She sees the way Nate looks at Bear, a quick professional glance that assesses the damage without losing focus on the threat. There is a kinship there, a recognition between two warriors. Nate sees the service vest, the graying muzzle, and the way the dog is trying to protect his owner even while he's broken. It makes the fire in Nate's chest burn even hotter. Nate finally shifts his gaze to Sophie. For a split second, the coldness in his eyes softens. He sees the tears, the wheelchair, and the raw, jagged fear on her face. It's a mirror of things he's seen in places like Kandahar and Fallujah. The innocent caught in the crossfire of someone else's malice. He gives her a short, sharp nod. It's a silent promise. "I've got you." Then he turns back to Kyle, and the sea-cold eyes return, harder than before. "You're going to walk away," Nate says, his tone conversational but deadly. "You're going to walk away right now, and you're never going to come back to this park. If I see you again, or if I hear that you've touched this woman or this dog, you're going to find out exactly what 20 years of service looks like when it's directed at a coward." He doesn't raise his voice, but the threat is more real than anything Kyle has ever heard. It's a promise of a world of pain that Kyle isn't prepared to enter. Kyle looks down at the ground and then at his friends, then back at Nate. He's looking for a way out that doesn't involve total humiliation, but there isn't one. Nate has stripped him of his power, his pride, and his platform. The bully is gone, replaced by a shaking 21-year-old who just realized he's in way over his head. The sun is still shining, the birds are starting to sing again, and the world is righting itself, one terrifying step at a time. Do you believe in the power of a single person to change a situation? Does Nate's presence make you feel a sense of justice being served? Tell me how you're feeling in the comments. Nate takes one final step, his chest nearly touching Kyle's, and for a moment, it looks like Kyle might actually break and run. But instead, he finds himself looking into the eyes of a man who knows exactly how to end a fight before it even begins. Nate's presence hits the grove like a shockwave, turning the humid afternoon air into a block of ice. He doesn't just stand there. He occupies every inch of the path, his boots planted firmly on the sun-bleached concrete. Kyle's foot is still hovering over Bear's broken form, a twitch of muscle away from another strike. But the momentum of the bully's ego has stalled out completely. The Navy SEAL's eyes are fixed on Kyle's face, tracing the sweat dripping from the boy's temple. Nate doesn't need to yell. The authority in his voice is a low-frequency hum that vibrates in the chest of every person standing under the oak trees. "Back off," Nate says again, his voice as sharp as a razor. "Take your foot away from that dog before I decide to move it for you." The threat is clear, delivered with a calm that is far more terrifying than a shout. Kyle looks at Nate's hands, large, scarred, and perfectly still at his sides. He looks at the way Nate's weight is distributed, ready to launch forward at a second's notice. The power shift is total and absolute. The three young men who were just king of the park are now realizing they are standing in the presence of a professional. Sophie watches from her wheelchair, her breath hitching in her throat. The relief is a physical wave that washes over her, making her dizzy. She reaches out, her hand finding Bear's ear, which is still twitching in pain. She feels the heat of the dog's body and the rapid, shallow rise and fall of his chest. Looking up at Nate, she sees more than just a stranger. She sees a wall of protection that has suddenly appeared between her and the end of her world. The sun highlights the faded camo pattern on Nate's shirt, a reminder of the life he lived before this park. Kyle finally lowers his foot, his sneakers squeaking as it hits the pavement. He tries to puff out his chest, but his shoulders are hunched, a clear sign of a man who knows he's lost the floor. "Whatever, man. The dog was acting crazy. We were just defending ourselves," he mutters, his eyes darting to Troy. But Troy is already 5 feet away, his hands up in a gesture of surrender. The group's unity is gone, dissolved by the sheer weight of Nate's stare. They are just 3 kids who picked a fight they can't finish. Nate doesn't respond to the lie. He doesn't need to. He moves forward, a slow and deliberate pace that forces Kyle to step backward into the grass. Nate creates a perimeter, a safe zone around Sophie and Bear that no one else is allowed to enter. The smell of the grass and the salty air of Norfolk seem to return to the grove now that the aggression has been pushed back. Nate looks down at Bear, his expression hardening as he sees the way the dog's leg is tucked under his body. The silence that follows is heavy, filled only with the distant sound of a car horn and the rustle of the oak leaves. It's a moment of pure tension, a standoff where the next move determines everything. Sophie feels like she's watching a movie, but the stakes are her life and her best friend. She looks at Nate's back, at the broad shoulders that seem to carry the weight of the entire park. She wonders how many times this man has stood between the innocent and the violent. "You have 3 seconds to start walking," Nate tells the group. His voice is a countdown clock that no one wants to see hit 0. He isn't looking at them with anger. He's looking at them with a cold, clinical detachment that suggests he's already planned exactly how to disable them if they stay. It's the look of a predator who has found something lower on the food chain. Kyle's face turns a deep shade of red, a mix of embarrassment and fear that makes his jaw lock. What would you do if you were in Kyle's position? Would you apologize or just run? Do you think Nate should let them go that easily after what they did to Bear? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts on justice and how it should be served in our communities. The tension holds for one more second before Kyle finally breaks, turning his head away from Nate's gaze and signaling to his friends that the game is over. Though the look in Nate's eyes suggests this is far from finished. Kyle's hands are shaking as he tries to stuff them into his pockets, a telltale sign that his bravado has completely evaporated. He takes another step back, his eyes fixed on the ground, because meeting Nate's gaze feels like staring into a loaded gun. The atmosphere in the park is brittle, like glass about to shatter. Nate stands his ground. But beneath the surface, his own body is reacting to the adrenaline. His right hand, hidden slightly behind his leg, begins a fine, rhythmic tremor. A souvenir from a roadside bomb in a place far away from Virginia. He clenches his fist, burying the shake in a surge of discipline. "I'm not gonna say it again," Nate growls, his voice dropping an octave. The threat isn't just in the words. It's in the way he steps into the space Kyle just vacated. He is reclaiming the park for Sophie. He is taking back the peace that was stolen. Troy and the third guy are already halfway to the parking lot, their heads down, leaving Kyle to face the music alone. It's a classic coward's exit, and the realization that his friends have abandoned him hits Kyle like a physical blow to the stomach. Sophie watches the interaction with a mix of awe and terror. She can see Nate's jaw muscles working, the tension in his neck as he keeps himself in check. She knows this man is dangerous, but for the first time in years, she doesn't feel like the danger is directed at her. She feels like she's standing in the eye of a hurricane. Total calm surrounded by a storm of potential violence. She reaches down to stroke Bear's head, her fingers trembling against the dog's soft fur. Bear lets out a soft moan, his eyes following Nate's every move. The heat of the day is still pressing down, making the air feel thick and heavy. The smell of the nearby pond, damp earth and stagnant water, drifts through the trees. Nate doesn't take his eyes off Kyle for even a second. He knows that a cornered bully is when a person is most likely to do something stupid. He's waiting for the flicker of movement, the twitch of a muscle that tells him he needs to act. But Kyle is paralyzed by the reality of the situation. He's never faced a man like Nate Graves. "You think you're tough because you can kick a dog?" Nate asks, his voice dripping with a cold, hard disdain. "You think that makes you a man? A man protects those who can't protect themselves. You're just a mistake in a pair of expensive shoes." The words hit Kyle harder than a fist would. They strip away the last bit of his pride, leaving him exposed in front of everyone in the grove. A few bystanders have gathered at the edge of the hill now, watching the scene in silence. The humiliation is absolute. Kyle looks up, his eyes glassy with a mix of rage and shame. He wants to lash out, but he can see the way Nate is standing, ready, balanced, and utterly immovable. The gap between them is more than just 5 feet of concrete. It's a lifetime of discipline versus a few years of entitlement. Kyle realizes that if he moves, he will lose. If he stays, he will lose. The only way out is to retreat and live with the memory of this moment for the rest of his life. Nate watches him, a silent sentinel of the sidewalk. He doesn't move until Kyle finally turns around and starts to walk, his pace fast and uneven. Kyle doesn't look back. He doesn't check on his friends. He just heads for the exit, his shadow trailing behind him like a dark stain on the grass. Nate doesn't relax his stance until Kyle is 100 yards away, a small figure disappearing into the glare of the afternoon sun. Only then does the Navy SEAL let out a long, slow breath. Do you think words can be more powerful than physical force in a situation like this? How do you feel about Nate's choice to dismantle Kyle's ego rather than his body? Share your thoughts and tell us if you've ever had to stand up for someone using only your voice. Nate turns back towards Sophie, but as he moves to kneel beside her, his hand tremors again, and he quickly tucks it away, hoping she didn't see the one crack in his armor. The sound of running feet fades into the distance, replaced by the sudden, heavy quiet of the park. It's the kind of silence that follows a lightning strike, ringing and hollow. Nate drops to one knee beside Bear, his movements quick and professional. The transformation is instant. The warrior who was just ready to tear apart a bully is gone. replaced by a man whose hands are now incredibly gentle as they move over the dog's injured body. He doesn't look at Sophie yet. He's focused on the patient. "Hey there, big guy," Nate says softly, his voice a low murmur that seems to soothe the dog instantly. Bear's tail gives a single, thumping wag against the concrete. Nate runs his fingers along the dog's ribs, feeling for the break he knows is there. He finds the spot where the first kick landed, and Bear flinches, a small whimper escaping his throat. Nate's face hardens for a second, a flash of that cold fire returning to his eyes. But he keeps his touch light. He checks the shoulder next, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sophie is leaning as far out of her chair as she can, her eyes wide with concern. Is he going to be okay?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. She's still shaking, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly being replaced by a crushing weight of worry. She looks at Nate's hands, the same hands that were just balled into fists, now cradling Bear's head with a tenderness that makes her heart ache. She sees the scar on Nate's thumb and the way his wedding ring catches the light. "He's tough," Nate says, looking up at her finally. The sea-cold eyes are gone, replaced by a deep, weary kindness. He's got a couple of cracked ribs and a bad bruise on his shoulder, but he's not broken. He's in shock, mostly. We need to get him to a vet, but he's going to make it. He reaches out and places a hand on Sophie's arm, a steadying presence that helps ground her. The contact is brief, but it's enough to stop the worst of her trembling. Sophie lets out a sob of pure relief, her head dropping into her hands. The tears she's been holding back since the first encounter finally break through. She cries for Bear, for the accident 5 years ago, and for the sheer, terrifying unfairness of the world. She cries because she was so alone, and suddenly, she isn't. Nate doesn't try to stop her. He just stays there, one hand on the dog and the other on the frame of her wheelchair, providing a silent anchor in the middle of her storm. The park around them starts to come back to life. A woman with a stroller walks past, glancing at them with a look of curiosity but moving on. The sun is starting to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the grass. The smell of the sea is stronger now, a salt, heavy breeze that cools the sweat on Sophie's face. She looks down at Bear, who has closed his eyes, his breathing finally starting to even out. He knows he's safe. He knows the danger has passed. "I'm Nate," the man says, breaking the silence. He stands up, offering her a hand to help her sit back properly in her chair. "Nate Graves, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Nobody deserves that." He looks toward the parking lot where the bullies disappeared. Cowards like that. They only look for targets they think won't fight back. They didn't realize who they were dealing with. He gives her a small, encouraging smile that reaches his eyes for the first time. Have you ever had a stranger step in to help you during a crisis? How does it feel to know that there are still people like Nate watching out for others? Share your stories of unexpected heroes in the comments to inspire our community. Nate reaches into his pocket and pulls out a phone, his thumb hovering over the screen as he looks at Sophie with an unspoken question. But the sound of an approaching siren makes them both turn toward the park entrance. The cooling sun hangs low over Norfolk, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. The flashing lights of the park ranger's truck bounce off the trees, a rhythmic reminder that the world has rules again. Sophie watches as Nate speaks to the ranger, his voice steady and calm as he recounts the events of the afternoon. He doesn't exaggerate. He doesn't need to. The evidence is right there on the ground, The scuff marks on the concrete, the injured dog, and the shattered look in Sophie's eyes. Bear is lying in the back of Nate's SUV now, resting on a pile of clean moving blankets Nate had in the trunk. The dog is sedated and comfortable, his head resting on his paws. Sophie sits in the passenger seat, her wheelchair folded in the back. The interior of the car smells like peppermint and old leather, a comforting, masculine scent that makes her feel more secure than she has in years. She looks out the window at the park, seeing it not as a place of fear, but as the place where she rediscovered her own strength. The ranger has their descriptions, Nate says as he climbs into the driver's seat. He says he knows who they are. They've been trouble before, but this time, there are witnesses. They won't be bothering anyone for a long time. He starts the engine, the low rumble of the motor a soothing vibration through the seat. He looks at Sophie, his expression thoughtful. You did good today, Sophie. You stood your ground for that dog. Most people would have just folded. Sophie shakes her head, a small smile playing on her lips. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was falling apart. She looks at her hands, which are finally still. I thought I'd lost everything 5 years ago. My legs, my independence. I thought Bear was the only thing I had left that made me feel human. When they kicked him, it felt like they were kicking the last part of me that mattered. She looks at Nate, her eyes bright with a new kind of light. Thank you for reminding me that I'm still worth fighting for. Nate nods, his hands gripping the steering wheel. We all need a reminder sometimes. Life hits hard, and it doesn't always play fair. But as long as you're still breathing, you're still in the fight. He pulls out of the parking lot, the SUV moving smoothly through the evening traffic. He looks like a man who has found a new mission, a sense of purpose that goes beyond just jogging through a park. He doesn't say it, but Sophie knows that this isn't the last time their paths will cross. The moral of the story is clear as the evening air. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Kindness isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength we have. Bear, with his unwavering loyalty, and Nate, with his quiet courage, are reminders that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they're just people who refuse to look away when someone else is in pain. Sophie has found hope again, a flickering flame that she's going to keep burning no matter what the world throws at her next. As they drive toward the veterinary clinic, the city lights start to twinkle on, 1,000,000 small stars against the darkening sky. The trauma of the afternoon is still there, but it's being eclipsed by the warmth of the connection they've made. Sophie realizes that her accident didn't just take things away. It prepared her for the moment she would meet a man like Nate. She isn't just a victim in a wheelchair anymore. She's a survivor with a story to tell and a loyal friend by her side who will never have to face a bully alone again. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a supporting story that inspires. Our community is built on hope and the courage to act, and we want you to be a part of it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words might be the exact inspiration someone else needs to hear today. The car pulls into the clinic parking lot, but as Nate turns off the engine, he looks at Sophie and asks a question that makes her realize this is just the beginning of a much larger journey they are about to take together.